Holy fuck, it's horse beef here. And today I'm talking about the unified rules of MMA because, I've been thinking recently after Guru's hour-long cope video where he tried to convince the entire MMA community at large that Sean O'Malley has in fact been robbed by the judges. Which, I mean, if there was really a case for that, don't you think that the judges would have just given it to Sean anyway, man? Like, it was such a clear win for Merab. But maybe I'm missing something. So I decided that I would educate myself and you guys. If you're in need of an education, then cool. But listen, this is mostly for myself, just so I can get to the bottom of this, man. Why are people saying that Sean O'Malley could be awarded that fight? It's because of damage, right? Because of Weasel, what he says in all of his breakdowns, damage trumps all. So people take the word damage and just apply it blindly without any sort of definition of what damage really means. So I'm hoping that the unified rules here can really paint a picture as to what exactly damage is, because you can do visual damage, which is like cuts and bruises and all this shit, but some fighters have scar tissue buildup and will bruise and cut more easily than other fighters. So I feel like there needs to be more of a clear definition there, because it can be a little bit skewed. And then you also have an example that always comes to my mind when I talk about this in particular, is that with GSP versus Johnny Hendricks, right? GSP looked like he got hit by a truck by the end of the fight, and Johnny Hendricks looked unscathed. But if you go back and you watch any fight where Johnny Hendricks has taken significant punishment, like against Robbie Lawler, for example, he doesn't seem to show much damage on the face. Same thing goes for Sean O'Malley, because he was beat up by Peter Yan, and all the fanboys were saying, oh yeah, who looked like the guy into a fight? The guy with the cut over the eye or the guy with no bruises or anything? Yeah, but who looked defeated by the end of the fight, right? Because body language, I feel like, should be taken into account, and in my opinion is a very important factor when it comes to damage, because if cuts and bruises aren't present, then the body language of a fighter, I think, tells an even bigger story, right? Because for me, if the cut isn't having a noticeable effect on the fighter, then it shouldn't be considered in the first place. But I guess technically the doctor could step in and stop the fight because of blood. So in that sense, yes, technically opening a cut is bringing the fight closer to the point of being stopped. But for me, if the cut isn't serious enough to be stopped by a doctor, then it really shouldn't be taken into much account unless it's had a visual effect, or a visible effect on the fighter who's received said cut. So let's just move past all this and just get into the specifics of what I'm talking about. This is as of 2017 unified rules. Effective striking and grappling shall be considered the first priority of round assessment. So I want to get into that really quickly, man, because it seems like some people have it made up in their minds that damage dealt on the feet, even if that's one punch in an entire round on the feet, can somehow trump an entire round of control time and ground and pound that everyone seems to ignore. I don't know. It's crazy to me. But let's continue. Effective aggressiveness is Plan B and should not be considered unless the judge does not see any advantage in the effective striking / grappling realm. Cage / ring control is Plan C. Should only be needed when all other criteria are 100% even for both competitors. This will be an extremely rare occurrence. Of course, that would be very, very rare, right? So prioritize criteria. We have effective striking / grappling. So let's get into it, man. Legal blows that have immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute towards the end of the match, with the immediate weighing in more heavily than the cumulative impact. Makes sense to me. Successful execution of takedowns, submission attempts, reversals, and the achievement of advantageous positions that produce immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute to the end of the match, with the immediate weighing in more heavily than the cumulative impact. It shall be noted that a successful takedown is not merely a changing of position, but the establishment of an attack from the use of the takedown. Top and bottom position fighters are assessed more on the impactful / effective results of their actions, more so than their position. Okay, that makes sense to me. This criterion will be the deciding factor in a majority of decisions when scoring a round. The next two criteria must be treated as backup and used only when effective grappling and striking is 100% equal for the round. So I guess when it comes to Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili, right, with that in mind, like for anyone scoring the first round for Sean over Merab, first of all, the strikes landed for Merab far outweighed the strikes landed by Sean. There was not one single point in round one where Merab looked like he was in any danger, right? So if we want to talk about immediate damage, no immediate damage, at least significant damage, was done. Sean O'Malley simply landed shots. You know who else landed shots in round 1 and round 3 for that matter at a higher rate and a higher volume than Sean did? Merab. But what, they were ground and pound strikes and also knees to the thighs, so that doesn't matter. But there's actually something pretty interesting in the criteria here that I think supports those knees to the thigh being a lot more significant than some people are making it out. Because if you've never been kneed in the thigh before, to that degree and with that volume, then you don't really understand exactly how damaging those can be. That's like being kicked in the leg over and over and over again. It's the same thing. It's like being Charlie horsed over and over again. You don't think that's doing damage? You don't think that's inhibiting Sean O'Malley's ability to move effectively around the octagon and create distance? Of course it does. So those have a genuine effect on Sean. But let's get through effective aggressiveness and fight area control before we get into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes that I wanted to focus on here. But effective aggressiveness, aggressively making attempts to finish the fight. The key term is effective. Chasing after an opponent with no effective result or impact should not render in the judges' assessments. Effective aggressiveness is only assessed if effective striking and grappling is 100% equal for both competitors. So if you would say that the effective grappling and striking was even between Sean O'Malley and Merab in round 1 or 3, then the winner still has to be Merab, unless you're going to argue that Sean had the edge in effective striking / grappling, which I personally don't subscribe to. The only round where you can say that Sean was more effective in was in round 5, because he actually had Merab in danger. There was not another point in that fight where Merab was in any danger really at all. But fight area control. Fighting area control is assessed by determining who is dictating the pace, place, and position of the match. So without going through the whole thing, because it's very repetitive to read these rules out over and over again, because they just repeat the same shit. They're only to be put in place if the number one priority, which is striking and grappling, is 100% even, right? Then we have come to the part of the unified rule set that I wanted to focus on, because we actually get somewhat of a definition for what to look for when it comes to the quote-unquote damage that people like Guru like to just say blindly. They just say the word damage. This guy did more damage, but there's no real definition of that. But the word damage isn't actually really used in the unified rules. It's more impact. So let's see how impact is defined in the unified rules. A judge shall assess if a fighter impacts their opponent significantly in the round, even though they may not have dominated the action. Impact includes visible evidence such as swelling and lacerations. Okay, so in the case of round 3, you have that little cut opened up on Merab. Then again, it wasn't really an effective cut. Like it didn't have a visible effect on Merab. It didn't affect his ability to fight and dominate the action for the most part. Afterwards, the cut wasn't worsened as the fight went along, but I see a lot of people giving round 3 to Merab anyway. So if you want to give him round 3 for the opening of that minor cut, then be my guest, I suppose. But impact shall also be assessed when a fighter's actions using striking and or grappling lead to a diminishing of their opponent's energy, confidence, abilities, and spirit. What? You mean damage isn't all you look at? Visible damage, swelling, and lacerations aren't the only thing considered when it comes to damage, quote unquote? You mean impact? Wow, that's crazy. You mean that Merab's pace, completely putting on a blistering pace on Sean O'Malley and depleting his energy, confidence, abilities, and spirit, all of which did occur during that fight, in every single round of that fight. Sean O'Malley looked defeated, and the same thing happened against Peter Yan too. He looked defeated, he looked depleted by the end of that fight, but all of his fanboys want to say, oh yeah, but he opened the cut. He opened the cut with the knee, so therefore he wins because blood was drawn. Shut the fuck up. How did Sean look at the end of the fight? Did Sean look like he could continue another 2 rounds? No, Peter Yan did though. And Merab looked like he can go another 10 rounds with Sean at that kind of pace. Sean looked like he lost the fight. He knew he lost the fight. And that's it. And that is a major factor here. Once again, I'm going to repeat that line again. Impact shall also be assessed when a fighter's actions using striking and or grappling lead to a diminishing of their opponent's energy, confidence, abilities, and spirit. So when you hear that line there, and then you apply that to what you witnessed during Merab Dvalishvili versus Sean O'Malley, What did you really see then? You saw Sean O'Malley open a cut as the only bit of damage. Oh, sorry, and the front kick to the solar plexus. I don't think it landed anywhere near the liver. It looked like it was just like a nicely placed front kick that hurt Merab, right? So you have the cut. One singular strike opens that cut, by the way. One singular strike, a grazing strike, as I always say, can open up a cut. That should not win you a round. But whatever, if you want to use that to score a round for him, then that's fine, as I said. But Merab did all of those things listed there. He diminished Sean's energy. Sean looked pretty gassed and out of that fight. His confidence was completely shot. He was afraid to let go on the feet. His abilities were diminished too. Weren't every commentator saying that his footwork looked shot, that everything about Sean looked off, right? So technically, based on the rule set, based on impact, the definition of impact, his abilities were diminished and his spirit, because of course they were, right? Tim Welch's corner advice, we're almost done with this, speaks for itself at the end of the day. His spirit was completely diminished by the end of that fight. All of these come as a direct result of impact. When a fighter is impacted with strikes by lack of control and or ability, this can create defining moments in the round and shall be assessed with great value. Wow. See, when you actually read through the rules and you don't just say damage trumps all, it kind of paints a different picture now, doesn't it? Doesn't it paint the picture of a man who is dominated, right? Doesn't it paint a picture of a man who was dominated in the case of Sean O'Malley? Because he looked completely diminished in all areas. And as it says right here, impacted by strikes, lack of control and or ability, this can create defining moments. So that those are listed as being of equal importance. You know what I mean? One is not above the other. No. These are listed as being of equal importance. It's just how you weigh it up, right? So, wow, it turns out that damage meant something else the entire time. But of course, everyone wants to just spit out their own definition of what damage actually is. But when you read through the rule set, it paints a different picture, as I keep saying. Now let's get into dominance. As MMA is an offensive-based sport, dominance of a round can be seen in striking when the losing fighter is forced to continually defend with no counters or reaction taken when openings present themselves. Dominance in the grappling phase can be seen by fighters taking dominant positions in the fight and utilizing those positions to attempt fight-ending submissions or attacks. Merab was attacking guillotines multiple times, used the guillotine to reverse position at one point, and threw ground and pound on Sean. Like I said, I feel like it shouldn't require much explanation because once again, Merab was throwing ground and pound. Knees to the thigh are damaging strikes and should be considered as such. And Sean had no answer to them, and they clearly stunted his ability to move around the octagon and switch stances effectively. In fact, he wasn't really switching stances that often. You would see him throw a little weak 1-2, switch stances, then throw the left hand. That was his typical offensive combination that he was throwing to actually land anything on Merab. It was that, and it was the knee up the middle. That's really all he had for the entirety of the fight, and not a single time did we see any of those strikes actually affect Merab in any significant way at all. So you want to talk about fight ending? Well, Merab looked like he was close to being finished in the 5th round, and that's about it. When you see Sean O'Malley gassed out on the bottom of Merab getting ground and pounded, what do you think you're witnessing? Do you look like you're witnessing a man just having a fucking cakewalk? Is that what you think you're watching? You're watching Sean O'Malley? Oh, yeah, a couple of shots to the head on the ground. But it's okay because he landed that one shot in the feet, though. That snapped Merab's head back. Well, I mean, Sean O'Malley's head can't be snapped back, really, when it's firmly placed on the canvas, But his face was getting pounded into the canvas. Regardless of what you say, he even had his back at one point standing up against the fence, was landing good shots on Sean as well. It's almost like you don't have eyes for ground and pound, but you have eyes for striking. But, whatever. So right here, the definition of dominance, I think, paints Merab as the winner as well. Merely holding a dominant position shall not be a primary factor in assessing dominance. Yes, what the fighter does with those positions is what must be assessed. And I agree with that too, right? And some people might read that and say, well, that's exactly what Merab was doing. But I disagree. Once again, I disagree. We've seen versions of that in the past. We've definitely seen versions of that happen, but I don't think that's what we saw against Sean, right? Because Merab would not have quadrupled Sean's output in that fight. He would not have quadrupled the amount of strikes landed in that fight if he was just laying and praying and being a wet blanket. So that narrative really does not hold much water. And then here we have duration. Duration is defined by the time spent by one fighter effectively attacking, controlling, and impacting their opponent, while the opponent offers little to no offensive output. That is the story of the entire fight. Sean O'Malley had little to no offensive output in almost every single one of those rounds. Right? He got a little bit off in the first round, a bit off in the third round, and then he had that moment in the fifth. But for the most part, it was Merab dominating the majority of those rounds. Sean O'Malley under him, attacking guillotines, attacking submissions, attacking ground and pound. And I think really what it comes down to is the majority of the MMA fan base, maybe not the majority, but the vocal minority, maybe it could be said, that you guys just completely ignore the damage of ground and pound. That's pretty much it. You don't value ground and pound as long as a few strikes were landed on the feet, right? That looked like they did some damage. But then you just ignore the multitude of ground and pound strikes that had a clear effect on Sean O'Malley. Because who looked, right? Ignore the cut. Who looked defeated after every single round? Who had their corner man babying them after every single round? Who did, right? And who was bouncing around in between every single round saying, "Oh, I'm having a great time"? It was Merab Dvalishvili. And there's a good reason for that, is because he saw, his corner saw, and Sean saw, and Sean's corner saw what everyone saw while watching the fight live, that Merab was kicking his ass. But now, after reading the unified rules of MMA, I've come to an even more confident conclusion that Merab won that fight completely. And there's no argument to give it to Sean because he landed one shot in this round or one shot in that round or a couple of shots in that round. It doesn't matter because for the majority of time, Merab had control of the fight, was delivering damaging blows. Doesn't matter how you define damage. I just read, or sorry, not even damage. Now I'm being convinced that it's damage that trumps everything. No, it's not damage, it's impact, right? Impact. And yes, cuts and lacerations are a factor, but so is body language, right? So is diminishing one's spirit, energy, and confidence as defined in the criteria itself. So before you guys come talking about damage this, damage that, I want you to stop saying damage. I want you to start saying impact, right? Because on one side, you hear the word damage, you instantly start thinking about cuts and bruises and all that, right? Because how else can you really justify what damage is without looking at just visual damage? But impact is the most important thing here. Impact is an important distinction to make because it means something differently than damage altogether and paints a more accurate picture as to what is actually being scored in MMA and what should be scored in MMA. See, I used to have an issue with the rules because I thought like damage is such a subjective thing. It shouldn't be, but it kind of is when you think about it, because some people will weigh up cuts more than other people, and you know, like in my case, because as I kept saying, scarred tissue. So Nate Diaz, right, he has that cut opened above his eye during every single fight, so it opens up. Oh, sorry, Nate can't win the decision because he bled. Okay, but scarred tissue is a thing, man. Some people, like I said, don't bruise or cut as easily as other fighters. Look at Corey Sandhagen. He's another example for me. I've never seen him get cut. I've never seen him bleed or show significant bruising at all. Does that mean that Corey Sandhagen is winning every one of his fights? Fuck no. Fuck no. Corey Sandhagen gets beat up sometimes. He got beat up by Peter Yan. He got beat up by Umar. He looked like he wasn't in a fight. Does that mean he won the fight? No. Because we have eyes to see what happens in the octagon, and being dishonest about it and bitching and whining, trying to rewrite history because you're upset at the result of a fight, you're a bitch, okay? You're a little bitch. MMA Guru, I know he made a response video to all of his comments, but from what I saw in that video, he still stood by his original comments in the original video, but he was just crying about some of the hate that he was getting. But whatever. The guy can't take it, but he can insult fighters' appearances and just say inflammatory shit towards anybody he wants. But the second that his fans hold him accountable, he can't seem to take it. But it is what it is. Hopefully he can learn from this experience and move on and learn to be more objective and stop letting his bias towards caucus fighters influence his opinions, right? And just objectively watching a fight, like your ability to objectively watch a fight is an important thing, especially if you're an MMA content creator. You need to be able to separate what you're witnessing, right, from what you prefer to happen. When I was watching Merab versus Peter Yan, there was not a single thought in my mind the entire time that Peter Yan had even done enough to win a certain round. I was being hopeful. I was thinking, yeah, maybe that shot that he landed right there was big enough to give him the round. No, nothing he did in that entire fight warranted him winning a round in that fight. And it's almost the same case for Sean O'Malley. But he landed a couple of good shots, so he wins. No, I'm sorry, guys. I'm not buying it. I'm sticking to my original opinion about this fight that Merab won it pretty dominantly. Even if you're able to marginally score 2 rounds for Sean O'Malley, it doesn't make the fight any less dominant for me personally. Although I understand, though, if you want to take that as a consolation prize and say, oh, you won 2 rounds, therefore it's a close fight, you go for it, man. If that makes you feel better, I have no issue with it. All power to you. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the unified rules. Just wanted to go through, educate myself as well as educate some of you if any of you are interested in being educated on what the unified rules actually say. But anyway, now that we've gone through it, I hope that there's a higher understanding of how exactly the scoring criteria is applied. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Ultimately, I know this is a more of a simple video. I'll make a more horse beef type video and upload that one tomorrow as well. But anyway, guys, I do appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.